Hey, this is Allie. Just a reminder to visit whenthenightcomesout.com and go to the Support Us page so you can become one of our patrons and we can continue to make these terrifying episodes for you. Thanks and enjoy. There's a moment when the sun disappears, when darkness falls and you're left with just your fears. That's the moment you feel your first pang of doubt. That's the moment when the night comes out. When the Night Comes Out presents Mirror. War, as they say, is hell. There's little that can be achieved for the average soldier during a war. Most of them end up dead or injured, and the mental wounds often extend well past the physical. However, there are some who seem geared toward war. They dream of conquest. They want endless power. Running into this type of person can be devastating and dangerous, particularly when the night comes out. The mortar shell hit the ground just 30 yards from where the private and the lieutenant were running. The explosion shook the earth enough to knock them off their feet. Then the shock wave hit and sent them flying. The lieutenant landed hard, the wind flying out of his lungs in a great rush. For a moment, he thought he was going to die, gasping and not able to pull in any air at all. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably just a few seconds, his diaphragm hit the reset button, and he took in a huge, gasping, whooping breath. The lieutenant got to his feet, but already the air over his head and all around him was buzzing with more mortar shells. Explosions vibrated the ground beneath him from all over. Where was the private? Lieutenant? He turned to see the private crawling up a small hill. The young man's right leg was a bloody mess, barely held attached to the knee by sinew. Damn it. The lieutenant scrambled down to meet the soldier and grabbed his arm. The private looked terrified, awash in pain, eyes wide and desperate. He wanted to believe the lieutenant would save him, that he would not die. The lieutenant had no way of knowing. Get up best you can. Let me help you stand. The lieutenant helped the private get to his one good leg. The poor lad was already soaked with sweat. Blood ran down his chin, too. Internal wounds, the lieutenant thought. Not good. If only they hadn't gotten separated. If they could find their unit again, the young man might have a chance. The lieutenant could hear the sound of blood splattering softly against the ground. The private was losing it all too fast. They hobbled forward as best they could. The field had once been full of trees, but the endless war, the nonstop shelling, had turned it into a wasteland. Still, not far, just barely visible in the night sky and the flickering light of the flares, the lieutenant could see the remains of a building. It was probably just 3 walls and nothing more, but it was still better than being out in the open. The lieutenant could set up a sniper's post and try to get them through to morning, provided the private had until morning. The lieutenant was a good soldier and a great shot with a rifle, but not a medic. He'd do his best, but the truth was, the private was probably a goner. Can you see it? The lieutenant pointed. We're heading there. The private nodded, unable to speak through the pain. They moved as fast as they could. Lucky now because the shells flew over their heads, landing far behind them. The lieutenant had a dimming hope there might be a column behind them, which would mean rescue was not far behind. It was a dim hope, but it was something on which to hang. It took what felt like hours. Finally, they reached the bombed-out building. To the lieutenant's relief, there was more of the structure standing than he had thought. Even much of the roof was still intact. The upper floors had fallen, but there was enough of a clearing on the bottom floor for the private and the lieutenant to find a place to rest. The lieutenant set the private down on a pile of bricks. Not a comfortable hospital bed, but it was something. When he looked around, there was no furniture, so this was the best there was. He was tempted to start a fire. It had been raining for nearly a week, and they were soaked through to the bone. A fire would have dried them, made them both feel better, but the enemy was too close. A fire might as well have been a signal for the enemy to come find them. The lieutenant had no intention of ending up dead or in a prisoner of war camp. The lieutenant took his first really good look at the private's leg. It was so much worse than he thought. The entire bottom half was just barely hanging on. There was so much blood. How the young man was even still alive, let alone capable of moving, was beyond him. He did his best, but it was piss poor. He tied a tourniquet around the leg with a belt. Then he did his best to clean what little was still there. This completed, he gave the private shots of painkillers in the hopes it would knock him out, and maybe the lad could die quietly in his sleep. When the medicine took effect, with the private letting his head drop to his chest, the lieutenant sat down. He set out some of his food and dug in. The MRE was horrible, but he was so hungry he wolfed it down. Once he had finished, he had almost licked all the packaging clean, when a voice interrupted him.
"That soldier is going to die."
It was deep, resonant, the kind of voice that commanded attention. The lieutenant immediately pulled his pistols and pointed into the shadows. "Who's there? Identify yourself or I'll kill you." A figure moved in the shadows. The lieutenant saw the man's hands and legs, part of his chest. The stranger in the shadows was large, his arms muscular. He wore a uniform colored a military green, but the lieutenant didn't recognize it and could not see the man's face. "Come out into the light. Let me see your face. Who are you, and where are you from?" "I will not, but before you shoot, here's what I can tell you, Lieutenant. I am not part of this war. I am not the enemy against which you are currently fighting. I am a soldier, from not too far away, however. And finally, if you think I'd wander into a battlefield without being armed as well, you are not the man I hoped you'd be." The lieutenant grit his teeth, but felt cold from his head down to his toes. Did he fire and hope this man was not an innocent? Did he risk being shot himself? The lieutenant lowered his weapon. He was tired, and there was a long night ahead of all of them. If this stranger did make a move he didn't like, he could always deal with it then. "Just know, I can get to these weapons so much faster than you can imagine," he told the stranger. "Now, how did you get here? Why are you here, in this building?" The stranger receded a bit further into the shadows. "I'm a traveler, that's all you need to know. I am from a place where there is a lot of war. More war than this, bigger and more horrifying than anything you've seen yet here." The lieutenant scoffed. "I find that hard to believe. This is the conflict dominating our planet right now. I am unaware of any other war being waged that includes weapons more devastating than what we have used so far." The stranger scoffed right back. "You are not from where I am." The lieutenant was already irritated. "Just tell me where you're from and we can stop playing word games. I'm tired. This man here is dying and I have a long night ahead of me. The enemy is all around us and could burst in here at any time, or a shell might fall right on this hideout and blow us all to kingdom come." The stranger heaved a great sigh. "Always so impatient. No sense of the dramatic. Fine. I'm from another world, another version of this reality." It was time for the lieutenant to laugh. He did so, despite the risk of letting out such a loud noise posed, given the dangerous situation he had only moments before explained to this stranger. Now I know you're either crazy or just having fun at my expense. Perhaps I should just shoot you and be done with it. The stranger grunted, as if considering this offer. You could, or you can pass the night listening to a story. At the end, if you feel I am still insane, you can still shoot me. The lieutenant considered this. It was going to be a long night. He should fortify this place and set up a sniper's nest, but he was intrigued now. The shelling was very distant, and there was nothing moving outside. Fine, tell me your tale, but keep in mind the terms of the contract you just made. Should I find the story lacking, you may not see morning. Fair enough. Now, let me tell you about my home. Where I come from, there is war all the time. I mean, all the time. One country, one ruler is always trying to invade or conquer someone else. This is a terrible thing and not a great way for a person to grow up, but it makes a person hard. It makes a person grow up strong. They trained me to fight almost from birth. My father was a general, and a respected one, so I could reap the benefits of that privilege. I went to the finest schools, was trained by the best. I thrived. I took to the training like a duck to water. I assume they have ducks in this world. Yes? Funny. There seems to be ducks in all worlds. Maybe even the same ones, who knows? There was a man in charge of the war. He was called general, but he was much more than that. He was a man as tall as a mountain and twice as strong, who told us where to go, who to fight, and when. I followed him without question, and soon graduated out of the military academy. And my country was the conquerors. We faced every enemy, and they went down in rivers of blood, their women and children screaming and crying in our wake. It looked as if we might defeat the entire planet, subjugate the global population. Could it be that peace was near at hand? Of course not, no. Instead, someone arose. Someone had the idea that the best way to bring permanent peace was to defeat those who had started and run the war, impose an iron-fisted rule, and force peace. A man so brutal, he did not leave women and children screaming in his wake. Instead, he just slaughtered them as well as the men and soldiers. Yes, I know. I can see from your face that you were wondering why this differed from what the general was already planning. He had conquered all the known world and was going to bring peace that way. Well, this young up-and-comer wanted his own army, his own lands. Fortunately, the general had grown fat and lazy over the years. It was easy for this newcomer to defeat him and take over that world. All of it. Every man, woman, and child knew of him and feared him. He made sure the streets ran with blood and the world trembled at his feet, begged him for mercy, and he built his throne from the bones of their children. So, our new friend took over. He swept through and burned everything in his wake, and when the entire planet was subjugated, he looked around at his creation and thought, I am so bored. This is not enough. Fortunately, this monster had employed scientists. They had one mission: find other worlds to conquer. Although they spent a lot of time looking into space, they found nothing which would suit our monster clothed in human skin. So they turned toward the idea of inner space. And, lo and behold, they found there were alternate realities, other dimensions, parallel universes where there was peace and new planets to conquer. This monster, this brute of a man, looked upon those new worlds. Some of them were so primitive, he knew he could take it in an afternoon. He saw those wonders, and he saw red, because he needed more blood. He needed to see lives shattered before him and the world quake in fear at his steps. So he gathered his armies, and he invaded. He took and took. While doing so, he also discovered something interesting. Each of us carries with us multiple worlds. Yes, even you, right now, carry with you multiple universes. Each step you take and decision you make spawns another world, another reality. However, another person cannot enter your realities, but there are those of us who appear, in some version, in world after world. Each just a hair different, but somehow all of them on similar paths, headed towards similar destinies. Our monstrous hero in my story found this out. He found there were other versions of himself in each world, all of them great military minds, all of them with the desire for war, for battle, for watching an enemy die before them. Some of them had achieved some level of greatness, but others were still in uniform, working their way up. Each of them was a mirror image in some way, like seeing a friend you have not seen in a long time. You recognize them, even as their faces change. You can see the ambition, the desire to take over behind the eyes. Knowing that each of those alternate versions of himself would mean, should he take over this world, there would be someone with the ambition to take it from him as he had done. So, our friend made a decision. That decision was to find the alternate versions of himself and kill them first. World after world fell. Our man, our monster, gathered knowledge and weapons, and his armies grew. I can see it in your face. You're wondering what I was doing during all of this. Was I just a follower? Did I just stand by and let this man slaughter hundreds, then thousands, then millions across the various worlds? Well, tell me what you would have done. Would you have tried to face off against the greatest military mind this or any universe had ever seen? Would you dare to stand up to the face of the devil himself and try to defy him? If you did, what do you think the devil would have said back to you? Perhaps he would have just laughed right before he ripped out your soul and then promised to do the same to your family. No, I want to tell you I was brave and that I faced down this monster and killed him. I want to tell you that when this man arose to fight against the general I had been with from childhood, I stayed loyal. No, I joined with the monster until it was all too much. Then, I ran. I figured out how to use the devices our scientists invented, and I jumped to another place, another time. I came here. I've been here for weeks now, watching and looking around. Once again, I found a world at war, a true global conflict. Except this one seems to be unfocused. I don't see just one man in power trying to take it from the rest of the world. We're all so much alike. We humans. You cannot imagine the horrors I have seen. Even worse, you cannot imagine the horrors I committed. You see, there's something that happens when you hold a person's life in your hands. When the person, no matter who they are, looks at you with that last glimmer of hope in their eyes. They're hoping you'll just let them live. They want you to let them go. Sometimes you do. Just to try to remember what it's like to be a human being with actual feelings, you let them go. They will remember you for the rest of their lives, you think. They will speak of you for generations in hushed tones, but remember how you let them go. There is power in mercy, but there is genuine passion, a true high, from violence. I wish it were not so. But it triggers something in the brain when you grab someone by their throat and watch that person's light go out. The look in their eyes as they face eternity and realize all of the things they thought about life, about themselves, are vanishing. We all spend our time in this bubble. We all walk around, convinced we are the main character in our own stories. As the hero, and the rest of the world are secondary characters or villains. The insane thing is every single person thinks that about themselves. If everyone is a main character, then there are no main characters. Do you want to know the truth? Do you want to know the harsh, terrifying, sad truth about the universe? There are only a few who are main characters. There are always a few who are at the top of the heap. The vast majority of the world, of every world, is meant for sport, are meant to be prey for those at the top. Most of us are the sidekicks. Hell, maybe worse, most of us are the chattel. I mean, think about it. There are apex predators throughout the natural world. I've seen them on every world, in every dimension too. Many of them look like what you have here, but with slight differences. There are bears, lions, and sharks. There are praying mantises. All of them, perfect, ruthless hunters. They kill without thinking, without questioning whether they should. They kill most of the time to feed, but there are always some who kill just for the sport of it. They kill because it's what they do, what they were built for. Only in our arrogance do we, as humans, tell ourselves we are the apex of all of them. Can you imagine? What hubris. All of those predators with their claws and teeth, muscles and enhanced senses all designed for killing, and we, nearly hairless, almost defenseless, claim dominion over them all. All humans are good for is deluding ourselves and making things that kill. I bet the very first murder a human ever did involved using a weapon. However, we have no natural defenses. Some sort of pathology, I think. Because humans were dropped naked, defenseless, but with big brains, the first emotion we felt must have been jealousy. And the jealousy led us to becoming killers. Anyway, I realized this truth of mine. As I stood there, next to the man who had subjugated thousands of worlds, I realized I was just a sidekick. I was there as a supporting character in his story. He might have been the villain, but I was not the hero. Of that, I was certain. So I found a scientist who was willing to work with me. In fact, he wanted to come with me, make the jump. We met in secret repeatedly, searching over and over for a world that we could jump to and hopefully not be seen. We planned to destroy the machines which opened the portals as we did so. I jumped. My scientist friend attempted, but his trigger device went off too soon. I ended up in a new world with his head, right shoulder, and hand, and nothing else. The shock had killed him before half of his body hit the ground. The lieutenant breathed deeply, inhaling the smell of the churned earth around the broken house. He also smelled blood from the private, who still bled onto the cement. He could also smell the odors of this strange man with his fantastical tale of alternate realities. Amuse him, he thought. The night was very long and very dark, and the story had been compelling, for sure. "How many did you kill?" he asked. There was silence from the man in the shadows. The lieutenant imagined his new friend with one eyebrow raised. "What do you mean?" The lieutenant grinned. "You tell me you were born into a world where you were trained by a tyrant to conquer and kill. Like the Spartans of old, here on our world, you were taught from birth to fight and destroy. You then betrayed your first master and spent your entire adult life beside someone who did all of those horrible things. You mean to tell me you jumped into this new world and did not kill anyone? You were taught to seek out your double and murder them straight away, were you not?" There was a soft, rhythmic noise from the stranger in the shadows. It took the lieutenant a moment to realize this was how the man laughed. It sounded very much like a machine trying to learn how to laugh. This was a person not accustomed to humor or laughter in general, he thought. "You are very clever," the man in the shadows replied. "I can see you are a man who is going places. Yes, of course, The first thing I did was find my doppelganger and kill that man. I tried to live my life there, but it was very hard to shake off the things which were taught to us, isn't it?" The lieutenant took a deep breath. "Yes, it is. How long before you began amassing your own army? Before you decided the best way to deal with the situation was to attack the man for whom you had been his right hand? I can tell this is where the story is going." "Really? And how can you tell?" "Because it's what I would do." The strange, gurgling laughter filtered from the shadows. The stranger moved. The sound of his feet and clothing rustled in the darkness. Slowly, the lieutenant saw more and more of the man there, his legs clad in thick military boots and wearing more of that green-colored fabric. Then his arms, thick with muscle and covered in scars. The lieutenant reached for his sidearm, but the stranger's voice cut through the darkness. "Don't even try. The bullets you use in this reality won't even penetrate my shields." The lieutenant didn't stop. He fired 4 times and was sure he hit the stranger. There were bright yellow flashes in the shadows, but the stranger kept moving. The man seemed so much larger than he had until then. As he stepped from the shadows, the lieutenant realized the stranger was wearing some kind of armor, and there were electronic flashes, lights. As he stepped into the light, the stranger did 2 things almost at the same time. First, he fired some kind of weapon, which created a searing pain in the lieutenant's gut. The second was he removed a helmet the lieutenant hadn't even realized the stranger was wearing. The stranger stepped into the light, and the lieutenant realized he was not a stranger. Of course, it was him. Some part of him knew it would be. He was taller, more muscular, and his hair was gray on top. A wicked scar, like some kind of lightning bolt, ran down the right side of his face, bisected his right eye, which was a milky white. His face was hard. A man who had done much, killed many, and seen horrors beyond anything the lieutenant could imagine. Staring into this unfeeling, uncaring, hard face, the lieutenant realized something else. "You lied. The entire story, all of it. You never tried to live peacefully. You didn't run. Perhaps someone did, but not you." The pain in his gut was spreading, like the time he had anesthetic delivered before a surgery. There was a tingling, a kind of warmth spreading in all directions. "You are the man. You are the dictator, the brute, the man who has killed across dimensions." The stranger wearing the lieutenant's face heaved a heavy sigh, as if he bore the weight of many worlds on his shoulders. "Yes, as I said, you are far too clever. All the versions of me are. You see, in order to allow my forces to come through so I can destroy and conquer this world, I always have to first destroy myself. Otherwise, I risk my own self destroying me. It's an endless loop." The lieutenant tried to stand, only to realize he could not. As he looked down, he saw his feet vanish, then his calves. He was disappearing. "I am no monster," the lieutenant said, his voice growing dim. "Perhaps you are not," his other self said coldly, "but I am." The lieutenant made one last attempt to bring his own weapon to bear, but by the time he reached for his rifle, his arms were vanishing. He turned his head, stared in horror at the eyes of the brutal mirror image of the man standing before him. He opened his mouth to scream, only to find he had no voice. Then he was gone. The general shook his head, almost sadly, but so used to this plan of action, he barely registered that his other self was gone. He had spent many days, years now, looking into the mirror of his own face and destroying, and it was no more a problem than squashing an annoying fly. In every world, the versions of himself were military men, some climbing their way up, but many were already at the top. This was why he had to kill them. They were all as potentially dangerous as he was. The private, still clinging to life, moaned on the ground. The general took out his pistol and shot him in the head. Soon he was gone as well, dissolved into nothingness. Outside, the firing had started again. The general stepped out as the ground shook beneath his feet from more shelling. He could hear soldiers' voices. "Time to decimate this world," he thought, and pressed a button on his belt buckle. Behind him, the air itself shimmered, then glowed white, then orange, then a hole appeared within the fabric of reality itself. It extended from the ground to 30 feet in the air. Beyond it, standing in regimented order, were thousands of soldiers, all of them dressed in armor. "Advance!" the general called. His armies moved forward without hesitation. The earth shook beneath their feet. Behold, a man destined to bathe in blood and conquer worlds. A man alone and trying hard to remain alone across this world and countless others. When we stare into the mirror, what do we see? Do we see the person we really are? Or do we delude ourselves into thinking we're the person we aspire to be? Sometimes cold, dead, dark eyes stare back at you, locking eyes, boring into the soul, and we are forced to contend with the darkness within. Sometimes, when the night comes out. You've been listening to When the Night Comes Out, a weekly horror anthology podcast with stories by Bryan W. Alaspa and narrated and produced by Allie James. Music by Vivek Abhishek. For Bryan's work, visit his website at bryanwalaspa.com or visit amazon.com to find his works of fiction and nonfiction. For Allie's work, find her on Facebook at Allie James Projects. Don't forget to check out our website, whenthenightcomesout.com, to learn how to support us on Patreon.